Picture this. You walk into your local supermarket. Half the shelves are empty. No bread, no meat, no vegetables. This isn't some disaster movie. This is what happens if the world loses access to this. This is phosphate. It fuels every calorie you eat. And right now, we're sleepwalking into a crisis. Why? Because one nation, Morocco, now controls more of this resource than OPEC controls oil. They hold the kill switch for the world's food supply, and they're starting to use it. You've never thought about phosphorus, but here's the truth. Every single calorie you ate today required it. Not oil, not water, phosphorus. It's one of the big three nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. These three make modern farming possible. We figured out nitrogen a century ago. We pull it from the air using the Haber-Bosch process. Potassium? It's common enough. But phosphorus? You can't make it. You can't fake it. You can't substitute it. You have to dig it from ancient rock deposits, deposits formed millions of years ago. There's a rule in farming called the law of the minimum. Your crops only grow as much as your scarcest nutrient allows. Think of it like a chain. It doesn't matter how strong the other links are. If one link breaks, the whole thing fails. You could have all the nitrogen in the world, all the water, all the sunshine. But if phosphorus runs short, your yields collapse. Remember the Green Revolution, the one that fed billions? It wasn't just about better seeds. It wasn't just about tractors. It was about phosphate fertilizer. Global population doubled between 1960 and 2000. Phosphorus made that possible. Without it, half the people alive today wouldn't exist. But something changed. We crossed a threshold. We moved from a world of resource abundance to a world of monopolized bottlenecks. Food security isn't just about farming techniques anymore. It's not about weather patterns. It's a geopolitical question, and the answer runs through one country, Morocco. So how did we get here? How did one nation end up holding the keys to your dinner table? Let's start with the number that changes everything. Morocco controls roughly 70% of the world's known phosphate rock reserves. That's approximately 50 billion metric tons. To put that in perspective, China, the second largest holder, has 3.8 billion tons. The United States, we're watching our Florida reserves decline year after year. This isn't just about quantity. Moroccan phosphate rock is exceptionally high quality. It's easier to mine, easier to process. And here's the kicker, it's lower in heavy metals like cadmium. Why does that matter? Compare Moroccan rock to phosphate from Senegal or Togo. That stuff is so contaminated with cadmium that the EU is moving to restrict its use. When regulators tighten environmental standards, Moroccan rock becomes even more valuable and even more expensive. But here's where conventional wisdom breaks down. You've been taught that when a resource gets scarce, the free market finds alternatives. New deposits get discovered, substitutes emerge. Innovation saves the day. Except phosphorus doesn't work that way. It's an element on the periodic table. You can't invent a replacement. You can't engineer a workaround. And the market isn't finding vast new sources. It's consolidating around the last major source. This situation has historical precedent, and it's darker than you think. In the 19th century, nations fought wars over bird droppings. Yes, you read that right. Bird droppings. They called it guano. Why? Because it was the best source of phosphorus available. The United States passed the Guano Islands Act in 1856. It allowed citizens to claim any uninhabited island covered in bird excrement. Peru and Chile went to war over it. Britain seized islands across the Pacific. People died for bird poop. That's how desperate nations get when phosphorus runs short. That desperation is cyclical. We thought we'd escaped it with massive rock phosphate deposits. But those deposits are finite, and they're not evenly distributed. Geology dealt Morocco a royal flush. The rest of the world is playing with a pair of twos. Here's what most people miss. This isn't just about Morocco having more, it's about everyone else having less. US production peaked decades ago. China's reserves are declining. Russia has some, But geopolitical tensions make that supply unreliable. The question isn't whether Morocco has leverage, it's what they plan to do with it. Possessing the rock is only step one. The real power comes from refining it, and that's where Morocco changed the game. Meet the Office Chérifien des Phosphates, OCP. It's a state-owned enterprise. It functions as the economic engine of the entire Kingdom of Morocco. But here's what makes OCP different. They stopped being just a mining operation decades ago. Morocco used to do what most resource-rich nations do: dig up raw materials, ship them overseas, let someone else refine them and profit from them. But OCP executed a vertical integration strategy that would make any Silicon Valley executive jealous. They built massive chemical processing plants. These plants convert raw phosphate rock into finished fertilizers: diammonium phosphate (DAP), monoammonium phosphate (MAP), triple superphosphate (TSP). The numbers tell the story. In 2024, OCP exported a record 12.37 million tons of fertilizer. That's up 13% year over year. Finished fertilizers now represent 69% of OCP's total revenue. They're not just selling rocks anymore, they're capturing the entire value chain. TSP exports alone jumped 48% in 2024. But here's where it gets strategically brilliant. OCP is using fertilizer as a diplomatic weapon. They've built fertilizer production facilities in Nigeria, in Ethiopia. They're offering African nations long-term supply agreements, technical partnerships, training programs. This is soft power in its purest form. They're trading fertilizer access for diplomatic influence. They're countering Chinese and Russian influence across the continent, 1 ton of fertilizer at a time. Think about what this means. When an African nation needs fertilizer, they don't just buy a product, they buy a relationship, they buy political alignment, they buy dependency. This contradicts everything you've been taught about the resource curse. You know the theory. Countries rich in natural resources inevitably suffer from corruption, stagnation, and authoritarian governance. But Morocco is executing a Singapore-style industrial strategy. They're using phosphate revenues to fund a massive transition to renewable energy, to desalination infrastructure. They're building a post-phosphate economy while still sitting on centuries of reserves. The conventional wisdom says resource wealth makes nations lazy and corrupt. The reality: Morocco is playing a long game that most Western strategists didn't see coming. They're not just a supplier, they're becoming the indispensable node in the global food system. And here's the uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask. What happens when they decide to use that power? This dominance comes with a geopolitical shadow. One that most Western nations desperately try to ignore. Let's talk about Western Sahara. It's a territory roughly the size of Colorado. It sits on Morocco's southern border. Morocco controls it. The Polisario Front, backed by Algeria, claims it should be independent. The UN calls it a non-self-governing territory. That's diplomatic speak for disputed. And right in the middle of this contested land sits the Boukra mine, one of the largest phosphate deposits on Earth. Activists call it blood phosphate. In 2024 alone, Morocco exported approximately 1.45 million tons of phosphate rock from Western Sahara. That's worth about $319 million. That's roughly 10% of Morocco's total phosphate exports, extracted from a territory whose legal status is contested by international law. Here's where the geopolitics get messy. In December 2020, the Trump administration officially recognized Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara. The United States became one of the only nations to do so. Why? Because stability in that region, and by extension the stability of phosphate supply, was deemed a strategic necessity. This isn't theoretical controversy. In 2017, a vessel called the NM Cherry Blossom was seized in South Africa. It was carrying phosphate from Western Sahara. The legal battle that followed highlighted just how fragile this supply chain really is. Companies buying Moroccan phosphate face potential legal action, reputational damage, supply disruptions. But here's the belief-breaking reality. Despite all the ESG commitments, despite the activist campaigns, despite the legal risks, major agricultural powers continue to buy. The European Union, officially neutral on Western Sahara's status, but they quietly import massive quantities of Moroccan fertilizer. Brazil, buying. India, buying. The United States, buying. Why? Because food security trumps human rights. That's not a moral statement. It's an observed fact. When the alternative is mass hunger or food price spikes that destabilize governments, policymakers choose the phosphate every single time. Here's the uncomfortable truth you need to understand. Your grocery bill is subsidized by a territorial dispute most people have never heard of. The lettuce in your salad, the bread on your table, the meat in your freezer. All of it depends on phosphate from contested territory. And until someone finds another 50 billion tons of high-quality phosphate rock, that's not changing. So what does this mean for you? Let's follow the money. We have a monopoly, we have a conflict zone, but how does this actually hit your wallet? Let's follow the chain. Fertilizer isn't bought at harvest time. It's purchased 6 to 12 months before planting. That creates a lag effect. High fertilizer prices today mean high food prices next year. And when prices spike, the damage doesn't show up immediately. It's a slow-rolling erosion, one that catches everyone off guard. Look at what happened in 2021 to 2022. The Russia-Ukraine war disrupted global fertilizer supplies. Russia is a major producer of nitrogen and potassium fertilizers. Phosphate prices surged as well. Some markets saw increases of over 250%. Morocco stepped in to fill the gap, but at a premium. Here's the math that matters to you. Fertilizer costs rose 28% between 2021 and 2022. US food prices rose 9.9% in 2022, another 5.8% in 2023. Economic analysis suggests that fertilizer cost increases accounted for roughly 1 to 2 percentage points of that food inflation. That's somewhere between 10% and 20% of the total increase. You probably heard politicians and pundits blaming corporate greed or supply chain issues. And sure, those played a role, but a significant chunk of your grocery bill increase came from phosphate rock mined in the Moroccan desert. Let me make this concrete. Say you spent $400 a month on groceries in 2021. By 2023, that same basket of goods cost you about $465. That's $65 more per month, about $780 per year. Of that increase, roughly $80 to $160 came directly from fertilizer costs. That's a weekend getaway, a car payment, a chunk of your emergency fund, gone because of phosphate. Now let's zoom out to the global picture. When phosphate prices spike, farmers in developing nations face an impossible choice. Buy expensive fertilizer and risk bankruptcy, or skip fertilizer and accept lower yields. Most choose the latter. They cut back on phosphate application, and the damage only becomes visible several seasons later, when soil fertility drops, when production collapses. Take a soybean farmer in Mato Grosso, Brazil, one of the world's agricultural powerhouses. If Moroccan DAP prices rise 30%, that farmer cancels expansion plans. Brazilian soy production stagnates. That restriction in supply raises the price of tofu in Tokyo and pork in Chicago. Why pork? Because pigs eat soy. One price increase in Morocco ripples through the entire global food web. The conventional wisdom says food inflation is about oil prices, or greedy middlemen, or government policy. The reality: research shows that 10 to 20% of recent food inflation was driven strictly by fertilizer costs. The invisible hand of the market is actually holding a bag of Moroccan phosphate. And here's the kicker: most people have no idea. They see rising prices at the checkout. They blame the supermarket, the government, abstract inflation. They don't see the phosphate mine 4,000 miles away. But now you do. And that changes everything. If the short-term risk is price, the long-term risk is existence. Are we actually running out? This is where the debate gets contentious. Early models in the 2000s predicted peak phosphorus, the point at which global production would peak and begin an irreversible decline. They said it would happen as early as 2030. Environmental scientists sounded alarms. Academic papers warned of civilizational collapse. Then something happened. The US Geological Survey and the International Fertilizer Development Center released revised estimates. They drastically increased known reserves. Suddenly, the timeline shifted from decades to centuries. Current estimates suggest global reserves could last 300 to 400 years at present consumption rates. So, is the crisis averted? Not quite. Here's the belief-breaking nuance. We're not running out of phosphorus atoms. We're running out of clean, accessible, economically viable phosphorus. The remaining reserves are harder to mine, deeper underground, contaminated with heavy metals that make processing expensive and environmentally damaging. Think of it like oil. We're not running out of oil in an absolute sense. There's still plenty in the ground, but the easy-to-extract, high-quality crude is gone. What's left requires fracking, deep-sea drilling, tar sands processing. Phosphate is following the same trajectory. The European Union is tightening regulations on cadmium content in fertilizers. That technically disqualifies significant portions of the world's remaining phosphate rock, which makes Morocco's high-grade, low-cadmium reserves even more valuable and even more expensive. Multiple studies project that even with expanded reserves, phosphate production will likely peak around mid-century, then gradually decline. Not because we've mined every last ton, but because the economics and energy costs of extraction become prohibitive. And here's the variable nobody can predict: demand. Current projections assume steady consumption. But what if sub-Saharan Africa, currently under-fertilized, develops its agriculture to Asian or American levels? What if global population reaches 10 billion? What if dietary shifts toward meat accelerate? Meat production requires far more phosphate per calorie. Why? Because you're feeding crops to animals first. It's inefficient, but it's what people want as they get wealthier. One analysis suggests that under high-demand scenarios, with full agricultural development in Africa and Asia, we could hit production constraints within 100 to 200 years, not 400. That might sound like a long time, but remember, we're talking about the foundation of human civilization, the ability to feed ourselves. The conventional wisdom says technology will save us. We'll find a synthetic substitute, just like we did for rubber, or vanilla, or indigo dye. The reality: you cannot synthesize an element on the periodic table. There is no artificial phosphorus. We either mine it, recycle it from human and animal waste, or we face declining food production. Recycling is possible. We could recover phosphorus from sewage, from animal manure, from food waste. But current recycling rates are abysmal, less than 20% globally. And building the infrastructure to capture and process that phosphorus requires massive investment. Investment that most nations aren't making. The narrative tension isn't "we run out next decade," it's this: the remaining reserves are concentrated in one region, controlled by one state-owned enterprise, in a geopolitically contested territory. That's not a geology problem, that's a power problem. So what does this mean for your wallet, for your future? It means the era of cheap food might be ending, but the era of smart food is just beginning. You now understand something most people don't. You see the invisible hand behind your grocery bill. You know why prices jumped, and you know they might jump again. The best thing you can do: support sustainable agriculture that wastes less fertilizer. Buy from farms that use precision agriculture, that test their soil, that apply nutrients efficiently. Every bit of efficiency takes pressure off the supply chain. It reduces dependency on Moroccan phosphate. It makes the system more resilient. You can also support phosphorus recycling initiatives, composting programs, wastewater treatment upgrades. These aren't sexy topics, but they're critical infrastructure for the future. And here's the bigger picture. This isn't just about phosphate. It's about understanding how the world really works. The forces that shape your life aren't always visible. They're not always on the news, but they're always there, operating in the background, pulling the strings. Knowledge is your best defense against inflation, against manipulation, against being caught off guard when the next crisis hits, because there will be a next crisis. Maybe it's phosphate, maybe it's lithium, maybe it's rare earth elements, maybe it's something you've never heard of. But now you know how to look for it, how to connect the dots, how to see the invisible hand. I want to know what you think. Is this a monopoly the world should worry about? Should we be investing more in phosphorus recycling? Should Western nations be concerned about food security? Let me know in the comments below. And if this opened your eyes to something you didn't know existed, share it, because most people have no idea this is happening. The more people who understand this, the harder it becomes for anyone to exploit it.